Hello everyone, welcome back to Rolling Solo. My name is Adam Smith, and we are going to pick up our playthrough of Solomon Kane from Mythic Games, exactly where we left it off in part number 2. If you haven't checked out any of those prior videos, including the unboxing, the setup part 1 and part 2, I'll put a link to all of those in a showcase in the top right hand corner, and you can get caught up to where we currently are right now in this story. The scene for Chapter 5A is all set up. I want to talk quickly about a couple different things that's worth noting before we move into the gameplay. First off, we have our main individuals. Again, these are the mortals in play, Solomon Kane and Gaston. Then we have over here a shadow. We have another shadow over here. We have Providence, of course. These are all in the unseen realm. And we have a pile of bones over here in the corner, or a corpse, essentially. Not much left of that corpse at this point. And the other thing I want to mention is that Gaston is trying to boast. He has the keyword gloater. So at the end of every Providence turn, so a typical round being Providence going and then usually a darkness turn, it'll be Providence and then gloating coming from Gaston and then into a darkness turn. And when Gaston does that gloating, he's going to do a talk action to Solomon Kane, and there is a modification that can happen if the shadows are within one space of Solomon Kane. They will then influence that talk modification and give a bonus to Gaston and his gloating. So we definitely don't want that. Now, the base value for this talk action that Gaston will make against Solomon Kane starts at a 0, so things are looking somewhat decent and probably will only get quite sketchy if a lot of shadows start showing up and really boosting up and modifying that value. Now, on the flip side, Solomon Kane being a prisoner, he has that key word. And that means he cannot move this character at all. Though game effects could potentially move him, the character can, of course, take any tests that are available to a prisoner. And in this particular case, based on the chapter setup, we can do a talk action. So at this point, we're pretty much locked into a conversation with Gaston. You'll also notice a new token has been placed inside the scenario we haven't seen before, and that's right here. This is an objective token, and as of right now, the chapter setup doesn't tell us anything besides just placing this token here. We don't know what it is or what it stands for just yet, but as we move through the chapter, if it's not detailed in the chapter setup as to what it is, it's likely going to pop up during a discovery card. Last but not least, I have a correction to make, and I noted this on screen at the end of part number 2, or near the tail end of it, when we were just about to resolve the ending of chapter 4A. You can see I have a discovery card here that states as an ongoing effect, before resolving this chapter, for each exploration token on D206, you can see there's one there, choose one of the effects, remove one light, or increase the danger by 1. Well, I don't want to increase the danger by 1 because that'll bump the threshold of shadows on the board potentially up to 3, because I'm right on the cusp there and I don't like that idea. So I'd rather go ahead and knock off a light from Providence. I do like the idea of rolling 4 dice still, and that will allow me to hopefully put more light back onto Providence. So let's go ahead and take away this one here. With that all squared away, let's jump into our very first turn. We do have an ongoing effect called Revelation. This is going to be really interesting. I'll talk about it when I start using my dice, which is going to come up right away because I'm rolling 4 for Providence to start us off. But basically, Faith and Bravery are going to have particular changes to the modifiers based on where and when I use them and in what actions. So it's going to be interesting. Let's see. Let's roll the dice and find out what we do. I do want to talk. Oh my gosh, look at all that bravery. Look at all that fear. So seeing as I have a whole bunch of both of those things, and this particular ongoing effect talks about them, we might as well learn, because this is going to matter. So it states right on, it says, for each bravery used to activate a talk test, virtues gain a +1 modifier to the test. That's pretty good. For each fear used to activate a talk test, virtues gain a -1 modifier for the test. So basically, if I go ahead and just go like this, that just nulls it out and it still stays as a talk 0. But if I happen to use a bravery and I'm able to use a faith in here, then I can actually get a +1 out of this. So that's kind of another interesting way to mess with the modification of things. And then it states down here, for each exploration token on D206, which we know is just the one we just saw seconds ago, Gaston gains +1 to his talk tests. So he's always going to be able to take advantage of that every time he talks. So I'm going to go ahead and roll a die, hoping that I can land a faith. Here we go. There we go. We got exactly what we needed. That's perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and place this. I'm going to do Bravery in here, a Faith in here, which will give me a +1 on the modification. I have these two to use now, but there's nothing else I really want to use them in. So for now, they'll be perfect options for later on. I'm going to slot them in over here. I really wanted to be able to place more light on Providence this turn, but that does not seem like it's going to be an option. So as we're doing this for the first time, I want you guys to see what exactly in terms of thresholds we're trying to get to. So when we're talking to Gaston, up to a 4 will net us a D10, 5 to 7 nets us D to 11, and an 8+, which is the best result, gets us a D to 12. When Solomon Kane is taking a talk action, the first thing we're going to do is check our compassion stat. You can see, unfortunately, if I remember correctly, at the very end of part number 2, I believe I chose to knock down compassion out of the 3 different stats of strength, clarity, and compassion that could be knocked down one. That was obviously a bad idea because I lost that +1 modifier I would have got if I had left it at 7. Next, we check to see if there's any shadows in the surrounding area of Solomon Kane that would give a -1 for each shadow, so that can be cumulative and really, really hurt you. But that's not going to happen here, so no negatives. There's also no positives around Providence because Providence is too far away, the aura cannot reach. Plus, I don't have light in anything that will give any advantage on modifiers right now, so I got to work towards making Providence more useful. So we only have the +1 modification that came from the ongoing discovery card Revelation, and that was based on the dice placement we talked about just moments ago. So +1 going in, grab an event card. What do we get in the far right hand corner? We have a 5, so that's pretty good because that'll end up being a 6, and that will put us at a decent spot. Hopefully, fingers crossed, this is going to be a good result. Seeds of Doubt. What was that? Exclaims Gaston. Rats exploring yon skeleton, says Kane, watching the bandit like a hawk, waiting for a single slight wavering of that black gun muzzle. The sound was of the rattle of bones. It's a automatic, or I should say instant effect here, and it says Gaston moves one area towards the objective that shows that cross. Well, interesting, that's that face symbol. So that's good to know. Now we understand why that token's in play. So Gaston is going to move one back towards it, and then Solomon Kane is going to move one area towards Gaston. Interesting. So now we know at least we're kind of heading that direction, and maybe that's giving us an idea of how much effort we need to put into this conversation. At the very bottom here, it says if Gaston is in the same area as that objective token, we reveal D18. And it's also a positive that we're getting further away from the shadow. Right now, this shadow would need to move 1, 2, 3 to get to Solomon Kane, or just 2 to be in the area to threaten. Taking a look at Providence, I need to decide, do I want to discard any cards in my hand right now? Courtesy or Resolve? I like Courtesy. This will allow me to remove one from the danger level, which is always great for controlling the threshold of the shadows. And also, there's a potential to get a modification there if we get low enough, so that's not bad. Plus, allows me to place light. So I think I'm going to keep this. These ones are always here, and Resolve I have no use for right now. This one just allows me to move 2, and because I'm a prisoner, I'm caught up with Gaston right now. I can't go anywhere that Gaston doesn't move to, and I'm not allowed to move because of that prisoner keyword, so this card doesn't really help me. And being able to move 2 light to any other sockets is only really good in a situation where there's a path to place light from Providence on, and there isn't. So this is the card I definitely want to remove. We'll put this in the discard pile, and instead, seeing as we know that when we talk to individuals we need better compassion, I'm going to play a card called Dignity. This will allow me to strengthen my compassion over time, or I basically can go ahead and uptick either strength, compassion, or clarity, and if Providence is on the board, I can repeat the action too if I want to, but at the cost of bumping up danger, which, as I said, is not exactly the best. I also need to draw a card up into my hand to ensure I have 2 cards going into my next turn with Providence. The card I got is Interrogation, which is a perfect card to have. It's a talk 4, although the downside is it's going to do the opposite of what I wanted to do in terms of boosting compassion. This one actually costs 1 compassion to pull off. Again, this is just going to my hand for now, but it's an option we can play with later. So at this point, in between Providence's end of turn and moving into a darkness turn, at this point Gaston is going to activate. And again, as we know, based on the Revelation card, that's an ongoing effect, For every one of these exploration tokens from the prior chapter, that's going to give him a +1. The other thing he takes into account when he does his talk to Solomon Kane is if there's any shadows surrounding Solomon Kane, he gets a +1 for each of them. So right now, no worries, but that worry could become a big time problem real soon. So for now, just a +1. We'll go ahead and grab an event card, and we're focusing, because Gaston is labeled as a villain, on the middle number of the event card. And we got ourselves a 3, so +1 is a 4. So looking at Solomon Kane here, in terms of this check that Gaston is doing against Solomon Kane by talking to him, with a 4, that is going to land D213. But you can see that it's up to a 4. So really like a 3 or a 2, any of those would land at that first threshold. And then of course it's a little different than when I talk to Gaston in terms of how it breaks out. It's 4, or it's up to 4, 5 to 7, and 8+ when I'm talking to Gaston. When Gaston's talking to Solomon Kane, it's up to 4, 5, or 6+. So we're going to be going ahead and grabbing D213. Oh, this is kind of interesting. So Gaston is doing some bantering talk with me. "How simple a mark you are, monsieur," laughs Gaston. "It's so easy for you to trust people, is it not? You meet someone that shares the same path with you and you immediately place him by your side. So foolish, so foolish." And this is an instant effect. It says move Gaston and Solomon Kane one area towards the objective token. It says -1 danger, which is actually awesome. I'm happy to drop that down by 1. All virtues may re-roll 1 dice in their reserve. So that's kind of nice too, actually. I can get rid of that fear and maybe re-roll it. So I think I'll actually do that. I'm going to go ahead right now and just grab this die right here, a fear die. I'm going to go ahead and give it a roll. We'll see how it lands. Okay, we got a determination. We'll use that. We'll put that in the reserve. And then it states down here if Gaston is in the same area as the objective token. Of course, that's not there just yet, so we can ignore it. So you can see if Gaston is on the bottom end of that resolution of a talk test, it's not so great for him. It doesn't really do much. It actually kind of helps me out. It's just general banter that doesn't seem to really affect Solomon Kane. But I imagine if he starts getting some better talk tests with shadows around me, things could get a little bit more aggressive on me. But you know what is always aggressive? A darkness card. And we don't have to worry about the story section. The near section, nothing around him currently, so we're good there. But in terms of the far section, the first one that actually will trigger is the closest shadow moves 2 to engage. So in terms of the closest shadow, this shadow would be 1, 2, 3 to get in. That's really, there's 3 spaces between these two. This shadow here, if it goes here, 1, 2, 3, 4. But if the shadow goes through the virtue, 1, 2, 3. So these are actually equal distance, and I have a choice. I can either have this shadow go right into Providence. I could choose to do a shockwave and get rid of it, or I could choose to put the shadow back to where it came and increase the danger level and basically say nothing happened. And just so you guys know, I also dropped my danger level down by 1, so it's currently at 3 from that last card we saw. Or I could just say and move this shadow. Now I'm tempted to move this one, because if I could get it close enough into the action and use Providence, I might be able to shockwave them both away. That is tough. That's a tough call. Don't know which way I want to go on this one, but I'm kind of leaning that way. So let's go ahead and actually have this shadow move. So I'm going to go ahead and move this shadow to right here. And then finally, there's going to be a spawn on Z if there weren't 2 shadows already in play because of my current shadow level. So Z is way over here. Now, the other interesting thing is if I can get my danger level low enough, I could potentially get the threshold down to just 1. And if I take out one of the shadows, only 1 will be on the board. But that I can tell you is going to be very difficult to hold on to, as the only way to keep it down to just 1 is to literally just have 1 on the danger track. And that is hard. Now, it's worth talking about one other modification to test, and it's around the word nemesis. So basically, if you have a nemesis, that's equivalent to Solomon Kane as a hero in terms of looking at the right number on the event card. And the reason I even want to mention that is because I've never talked about the modifier that comes from the danger track, which right now is at -1. This will have no impact on the current chapter because there is no nemesis in play, but if there was, that modification would apply to the nemesis. And it really isn't impossible to get that danger track all the way down, because I have cards like Courtesy that can slowly knock it down. It just will take a little bit of time to do it. I could do it now once, and then it might come back through my hand another time, and I could really get it down very, very low for future rounds. Could be very helpful. But as we know, darkness has a way of creeping back into the equation. My goal here is to really get some light going on Providence, because Solomon Kane is getting close enough to be worthwhile boosting up with some tests. And I'd love to get light on these two. That would be great. We'll see if we can pull that off. I don't know if we can do both, but we will try. I'm going to go ahead and try to re-roll a Determination. What I'm trying to get here is another Faith. This will allow me to do 3 actions on this turn. That would be huge if I can pull this off. So come on, Faith. Please don't fail me now. Oh, I got a Fear. But it's still not bad, because I can still do 3 actions. What I was hoping to get there was hoping, instead of getting a Fear, to get a Faith, so that I can actually get a +1 from that whole situation with the Revelation card, in terms of not having a Fear here to put a -1 on. Because again, this gives me a +1, this gives me a -1 when doing a talk, so they just cancel out. It would have been nice to try to get that +1 in there as well, but it just didn't work out. We still got 3 actions done, which is awesome. I'm definitely going to focus on light here for both of these, so that's a simple cash in. We're going to go ahead and do a Talk 0, again, because I have a Bravery and a Fear. It's a +1, -1, so that cancels itself out. It still stays at 0. Compassion level right now, I have no modifications, so still 0. I do have 1 shadow next to Solomon Kane, so that's a -1, but guess what? Because Providence's aura size has grown and is now 2 spaces away, it can reach Solomon Kane, and I can add 3 to the test, so 3 -1 is 2 going into it. Taking the card off the top of the event deck, we have a 4. Okay, so that's not exactly the best result ever. Now, 4, I think, is an average pull for a right side number, which is not bad. I do have a luck die, so I could try to pull for a higher result. The best I could potentially get is a 7. Again, the best possible result on talking to Gaston would be an 8+. So right now, just having a 6 is pretty good. But we could also go backwards and be really bad. So you know what? At the end of the day, I think I'm just going to stick with what we have at level 6, and that will have us interact with the exact same discovery card we saw prior. So Seeds of Doubt comes up again, which allows Gaston to move 1 back, and Solomon Kane back 1. Taking a look at my hand around Providence, I'm not really a big fan of Dignity at this point anymore. I don't think I'm going to try to bump up my Compassion at this point. I think I have another plan. Plus, I don't want to add any more danger. I like the fact that my danger is quite low. Instead, I'm going to go ahead and add the 2 cards that I have in hand. This one here allows me to explore 4, which is not useful right now, or I can draw 2 Blessings and choose one to put in the cloud. We've never seen Blessings, but if I get enough dice and I have enough time, I might be able to pull that off. But the other one I really like is the Interrogation card here, the Talk 4. That could be huge. I know it's just off screen, but if we get these 4 symbols in, a Talk 4 to start as a base on top of a bonus of Providence would be 7, which would be extremely easy to get to that 8 threshold we need for the best result when we're talking to Gaston. Providence's turn is done. The dice have all been removed from the player board. Our cards are all reset. We're moving into Gaston's talk action, or gloat action, essentially, to Solomon Kane. And you can see, thanks to the recent movement for Solomon Kane, I'm not going to be giving a +1 to Gaston's talk action this time, because I'm further away from the shadow that's looming behind me right now. The only +1 that Gaston will get is from this exploration token over here. So +1 going in on the event card, and again, looking at the middle, is a 2, so it'll end up being a 3. Again, we have bantering talk. We're not doing very good at this whole insulting each other and gloating back and forth. So at this point in time, we're moving both of these characters 1 area towards the objective token. I'm going to take another -1 to danger, dropping down even further, which is great. And then, of course, if Gaston is in the same area, we would reveal D to 18. He's very close, but not there just yet. Darkness is up next, and we have, let's see, any shadows within the surrounding area of Solomon Kane? No. Do we have shadows engaging over here somewhere? Yes, the closest shadow moves 2 to engage. Now, this was a tough decision to make, because where the shadow was, I could have had the shadow move through Providence. Providence could have gone ahead and done a shockwave, but you can see her aura right now, even though it's powered up, can only get to here, which means it wouldn't be able to take out this other shadow over here. I just don't know if I want to waste it on just a single shadow. Plus, the new one that comes out is going to spawn over here anyway, so it's going to likely be in our path regardless. So I think I'm just going to leave Providence on the board to help us with that last epic talk against Gaston, rather than use to stop the shadow from engaging into Solomon Kane's space. So now that the shadow has moved into his space, the shadow disappears and we pull an event card. Oh no, this does not look good. It says Lingering Vice, reveal one random sin card. So this is the first time you guys have ever seen the sin deck that comes inside the game, and of course this is based on the 7 deadly sins, so there's one for each of the cards. In order to do this randomly, I'm just going to grab a d8 and roll it. Of course, if we get an 8, we'll just keep rolling. So here we go. Which one of these sins is going to be introduced? Number 1. Envy, a painful or resentful longing aroused by someone else's possessions, qualities, or luck. The life of a Puritan has placed many strictures upon Solomon Kane, and he feels envy to the freedom of others. Sensing this loss of dignity, the virtues begin to limit their support. Virtues cannot gain or use, oh my, mercy, luck, or... oh, we haven't even gotten to the point of ever getting blessings, but apparently that's not going to be happening anytime soon. And I was hoping to use a card in my hand to make that happen too. So this sits and remains in play, and as you can see, it has a socket, and that can be filled with light. And when it does get filled with light, the card is then discarded. But for now, that effect remains in play until I place light in it. That's going to end this section of the Darkness card, and then the spawn is on X. X would actually be way over here, and currently we have both of the shadows out already, meeting the threshold, so no more shadows coming in. It's also worth noting that I should have removed the shadow that's in the same space as Solomon Kane the second that we went ahead and triggered that event card. Time to begin another round of play with Providence. Let's roll some dice and see what options we can go after. I'm really hoping to do some talking here. Pretty happy with that dice roll. I don't even need to change anything. I'll place one of them in my reserve. This is going to work out great. Interrogation is the card I'm using. I had everything I needed to fill all these slots perfectly, and I just have to lose 1 compassion. I now gain a talk action of a base of 4. I'll gladly take that hit in compassion. It's not going to make any changes to modifications. Now let's go ahead and we're going to do a talk action with Gaston. This should be a very, very successful outcome. Because I did a talk action on one of my cards that were slotted into my left hand, you'll see here that bravery +1, the bravery die that I used to initiate that talk action, is going to count as a +1 modifier. So I have 1 from that, I have 4 from the base level talk action, plus I have 3 for my virtue, so I'm already at 8. I've already successfully made the check, but I still need to go ahead and pull an event card anyway. This is just going to go beyond it. And we ended up with a 3, so a total of 11. A rattle of bones. You had best not miss, Frenchman, Kane taunts. I've dealt with men more vicious than you and half as worthy. If you lower your pistol, I might let you leave with your life and your honor intact. Gaston takes a step back, his eyes darting nervously, and Kane steps with him. This is an instant effect. It says Gaston moves 1 area towards the objective token. Solomon Kane also moves 1 area towards Gaston. If Gaston is in the same space as the objective token, we reveal D218, and he is, so we'll be doing that. If Gaston wasn't in the same space as the objective token, then we'd have a choice to make, but we're not doing that choice. The Real Butcher. Silently emerging from the dark corridor behind Gaston, the landlord looms over the Frenchman's slight frame and brings a great cleaver crashing down on his skull. Virtues receive +1 danger or -1 clarity and -1 compassion. I'm definitely going to choose +1 danger, seeing as we're so low on that track. Gaston has been defeated, and this is going to bring the chapter to a close. Well, I can tell you right now, I did not expect that outcome, but we're going to go ahead and have a danger increase from 2 to 3. I didn't want to knock my clarity down or my compassion down any further, so that's the reason why I focused on danger. We do get to finish out Providence's turn before we finish the chapter, and remember that ongoing effect that's going to have us remove 1 light or increase the danger is also going to trigger right now as we resolve this chapter, as it's an ongoing remains in play effect. So first, let's deal with our left hand. Do we want to add anything here? Yes, we definitely do. And honestly, Elegance seems like a good idea, seeing as we don't know for sure just yet if we're going into potentially a story. If we happen to go to a scene, this will not be as useful, but I know I'm losing a light anyway, so putting this in here sounds pretty safe. The other one I have here in hand is Finesse, to add or remove a darkness, but I'm actually really happy with this one in the right hand, so I won't discard it and I'll leave it as is. We need to draw up, and when we draw up, it will be taking the last card available. We'll have to shuffle our discard pile so that we have a deck to work with later on. And we don't want to forget about our wonderful Sin card we have up here. This sticks with us until we place Light here. So that Elegance card I just placed in my hand, later on, if we can place 2 Light, that's going to be really handy to get rid of. This is the card I'm referring to right now that triggers. It says, before resolving this chapter, for each exploration token on D206, choose an effect. Do we want to increase the danger? No, that'll butt us right up against the next level of threshold. I don't want that, so I'm happy with removing 1 light. I'll go ahead and knock down the aura size for Providence by 1. And while we're doing some cleanup and moving into the resolving of Chapter 5A, we might as well go ahead and get rid of this card here for Gaston because, well, he's defeated now. He is gone. Plus, it states right at the bottom, remains in play until the end of Chapter 5, which is coming up in a few seconds. So just to review the outcome section here and the objective section, for those of you that might have forgotten, if Gaston is defeated, we place 2 purity. If danger is ever 8+, we remove a purity. And if clarity is between 0 and 4, we remove a purity. So we gain 2 purity because Gaston is defeated. However, in terms of the danger and clarity, those things never happened. So we're going to be going into the outcome 6A. We now move into Chapter 6A, and guess what? There's something I forgot that I just remembered as we move into a new story. The last story that I did in part number 2, when we resolved the Chapter 4A, because I had 3 light on Solomon Kane's path, I should have been able to go ahead and make a modification to one of my stats. So retroactively, I'm going to go ahead and take that stat boost. I don't want to forget about it. I made a note about this in the pin comment of part number 2 as well. Also, as you can see in the special rules, we're going to gain a clarity, so I'll make those 2 adjustments right after we read through the narrative. Also, just before we go ahead and read through the narrative of this one, let's go ahead and bump up our clarity at the same time. So 1 clarity increase, and I can increase another stat as well. I'm going to choose to increase my strength to get a +1 modifier there. So strength will go to 7 and clarity will go up to 9. Another thing that's really important to note, and I've also noted this in the other parts of this playthrough, part 2 and part 1, to ensure everyone is clear on it, because it can be a little deceiving. It states right down here in the bottom of the discovery cards, remains in play, and you may think that cards that you get and gather through the chapters as you move along continue to stay with you as you go, so long as they don't have something that's really specific, like this one here that says, of course, as soon as Gaston was out of the picture, and based on this down below at the end of Chapter 5, that card's removed. How these discovery cards work in terms of a chapter by chapter basis is you will get a number of them during a given chapter, and at the end of the chapter, those discovery cards are removed from the game unless they specify they stick around longer, like this one. So we didn't make any major errors because we didn't make use of any of these discovery cards that sat around, but now we're going to clean up a bunch of them. So Gaston in the last chapter is no longer part of the equation, so this card's definitely going away, and we had concluded Chapter 5, so perfect timing there. This Revelation card was tied to it and actually even referenced it. This is also gone. And then another Revelation card that was tied to it is also gone. And then this one was sticking around from a chapter even further back than that. That is also removed. We also are going to be removing these ones as well, so Ominous Feeling will go. And lastly, Distrust will also be removed as we ended off 5A, that chapter. So again, remember, as you move through a storybook, there'll be a number of chapters. Once you go past the first chapter, discard all the discovery cards related to it unless it specifically tells you to keep them around. And again, this is all in relation to any time you see cards that say remains in play. There's even a mention of this inside the rulebook to let you know that at the end of each of these chapters are all discarded. Again, no major gameplay impacts here because a lot of them were specific to the chapter they were introduced and can't and weren't used afterwards anyway. Out of all those discovery cards, the only one that I could have used would have been Ominous Feeling, but we didn't have a chance to use it. So thankfully, like I said, we're ready to rock with Chapter 6A. So, Solomon had backed the Frenchman into the doorway and was within reach of his discarded weapons. Kane had but one chance, and so, with all the speed he could muster, made for his blade, to mayhaps turn the tide. Gaston's thumb pulls back the hammer on his pistol. From the darkness behind Gaston's back, a broad, vague form arises and a gleaming blade sweeps down. The Frenchman drops to his knees like a butchered ox, brains spilling from his cleft skull. Above him towers the figure of a host, a wild and terrible spectacle, still clutching the hanger with which he slew the bandit. Ho ho, he roars, back! Kane is fingertips away from his weapons, but the host thrusts a bloody cleaver towards his throat. Back, he repeats with a tigerish roar, causing Kane to retreat from the menacing weapon and the insanity in his red eyes. The Englishman stands silent, his flesh crawling as he senses a deeper and more hideous threat than the Frenchman had offered. There is something inhuman about this man, who now sways to and fro like some giant forest beast, while his mirthless laughter booms out again. So as you can see, just out of the shot there, we have an outcome of bright and dark. We're illuminating Solomon Kane's path. We're going to set up our darkness deck with 4 cards. I've got those 4 cards right here. We're going to pull discovery card D219 and read what it says. A thirst for vengeance. Gaston the butcher, shouts the landlord, kicking the corpse at his feet. Ho ho, my fine brigand, we'll hunt no more. I had heard of this fool who roamed the Black Forest. He wished for gold, and he found death. Now your gold shall be mine, and more than gold, vengeance. So we have a new ongoing effect that's going to remain in play. Again, this will remain in play until the end of the chapter, unless it specifies otherwise. Kane must calm the tavern keeper's spirits. During this chapter, virtues may take talk tests. We can talk. If we get up to a 5 on the test, it's D220. 6 plus is D221. Starting things off with Providence's turn, we're going to roll some dice. We can do a talk test, which is pretty interesting. And we can also use light. We also have this unfortunate sin here we have to deal with at some point, unless we don't want to be using our mercy cubes, luck cubes, or any bless tokens in the future. So that's something else to keep in mind. Let's go ahead and roll, find out. Wow, okay, so we got 2 determination, we have a faith, and we have a fear. I would really like to be able to pull off doing this one right here, so let's go ahead and try to re-roll one of these and see if this pans out. What I'm looking for, hopefully, is a bravery is what I want. So let's see how it goes. Okay, we end up getting fear. That did not go as planned. This time around, I'm just going to focus on placing light. We're not going to bother talking this turn. I'm going to use elegance to place 2 light, and I'm going to place both of those light on Solomon Kane's path because we only have 4 darkness cards, and I really want to get that up to at least 3 as quick as possible. Gone ahead and added 2 tokens to the path, feeling pretty good about that first action. I think it makes a lot of sense to go ahead and add finesse to my left hand. I'll keep this one here for now. This one allows me, of course, to add or remove a darkness card. That could come in handy really nicely. So I'm going to go ahead and drop another card to fill my current hand. And we got ourselves courtesy. So this is a -1 danger or +1 for light. Time for the darkness turn. Let's see how this pans out. Story says -1 on the clarity. And just like that, we've dropped down to position 8 and only a +1 on the modifier. All right, let's see how this next round for Providence goes, see if we can get some options. I'd like to do some talking to see what that's all about. I'm going to go ahead and try and re-roll this one here because I already have one of them up in my reserved area. We'll see if we can get something more useful for the future. Perfect, a nice wild. So I'm actually going to put that up here, and I'll use this one to satisfy here, and we can now do a talk 0. Again, remember the discovery card that did the whole boosting modification in terms of a -1 for having this fear in here is no longer part of the equation. That was part of the last chapter, so no issues there. It's just a straight talk. And this one right here allows me to place some light, which is going to be awesome. We're now up to 3 light on the path, which is exactly where we want to be, or maybe even further, depending on how the darkness cards pan out. I'll probably try and remove a darkness card to have this chapter go by quicker so we don't take too many penalties. But now let's go ahead and do a talk action. So for the talk test here, we're going to take a look at our compassion level. Do we have any bonuses there? I'm currently at 5, which puts me right in the middle, so nothing modifying there. And of course, it's not a scene, so we don't get any kind of bonus or negative penalty for shadows being around, for instance, or for Providence being on the board and boosting my tests. So we're going to go ahead and draw an event card, look at the far right-hand number, and see how we land. We ended up with a 6. Now this looks awesome. It says, a shattered man. The landlord's voice breaks in a hideous, grotesque sob as he recounts his torments. Kane makes no answer, though compassion fills his eyes. This man was not the first he had seen, whose brain had shattered amid the horrors of the terrible continental prisons. Place 2 light. That's awesome. Well, seeing as I know we have a couple more rounds to go and I can't deplete the darkness deck that quickly, I'm going to go ahead and place 1 light on this envy card. We're going to get rid of that sin so it no longer haunts us. Plus, we're going to add to the aura size for Providence. Quite happy with that outcome, and now it comes down to whether I want to discard anything from my hand and replace anything. Honestly, in this situation right now, knowing that I can just slowly put 1 light on the path going forward and I should be all right, this is a great card to have. I'll get rid of 1 darkness to speed things up, and I'd like to keep this because I'd like to get some blessings at some point. Let's see what the darkness has for us this time around. At the very top it says, all virtues remove 1 die from their reserve. Well, that wild die is disappearing. Let's head into the next round and see how we do. So far things are going pretty good in this chapter. I'm going to try and re-roll this die right here. What I'm trying to accomplish is potentially being able to place another light so we can guarantee we'll be on the bright side of things even if a nasty darkness card comes up. If that doesn't work, we can move towards the idea of talking. We'll see how it goes. But I'm going to roll this one here. Let's see what we get. Ah, there we go. We got exactly what we wanted. So this is going to sit like this, and this will sit right here. So we'll go ahead and remove the dice, resolve this card by discarding it, and we're going to go ahead and remove a card from the darkness deck. Thankfully, I'll take a look to see what it was, just to see what kind of pain we were going to go through. Oh my gosh, look. Remove a light token. I love it when that happens. We've got only 1 left, which will resolve at the end of this round, which is great. I can place 1 more light. I'm certainly going to do that, and it's going to go up here to hopefully ensure we're safe for that last card. To round out my turn, I'm quite happy with this card over here. I'm going to add Courtesy from my hand to fill in my left hand slot, and we're going to draw up a new card to get in hand. I still have Guile, which I haven't used in a bit. We have Resolve here. This is a pretty good one too. Now to find out what the last darkness card has for us, it is all virtues discard the right hand action card. Okay, so we'll be down 1 card going into the next round of play. So that's going to be this one, which looks like it's going to take away my ability to go after some blessings that I was hoping for. So we come to the end of a chapter, and as I've just explained, and we'll continue to do as we go through the rest of the chapters, all the discovery cards that state remains in play are going to be discarded unless they otherwise stay in play because they specify it. So this one will be discarded at this point. We're also going to go ahead and ensure that we take the bonuses we get from lighting up the path. So in this case, because for the first time in this whole playthrough, I've got 4 on the path, that will be 2 modifications to my stat tracks, which is pretty awesome. We've been doing a lot of talk tests lately, which link to compassion, so I really think I need to bump that up. I'm going to bump it up 2, so we at least get a +1 in it. Pretty happy with that outcome. And as our path is bright, we're moving to 7A. And that, my friends, is going to do it for this video. Join me as we jump into part number 4 with chapter 7A, which as you can see is going to be a scene. We'll read through the narrative, the keyword and stats, the objectives and outcome that we're trying to succeed in to move to the next chapter. Thank you guys so much for watching to this point, and as always, keep on rolling solo.